Hi guys, today we're going to see how we can light up an interior scene inside 3ds Max by using V-Ray. Alright, first of all, before I start, I want to show you guys what I have for a scene over here. As you can see, it's a fairly simple scene. It's a box. We have some extrusions over here that's left some space for a window. I have a window frame, and also inside the window frame I have a glass panel, which I've hidden it with a layer. So as you can see here, the glass has been hidden for now. I'll tell you later on why. So I've made a simple glass, it's hidden. We have another teapot in the scene. We're going to be using it later. So for now I have it hidden as well. So nothing fancy. The entire scene is a simple box with one opening where hopefully sun or light is going to be coming through. Alright, let's see then. How do we start up our lighting our scene? The first thing we have to select and check is to see the settings we have for our camera. So I'm gonna go click on interior camera, and it's a very basic physical camera, a V-Ray physical camera. The only thing that I've changed is I just played around with the size of the film gate and the focal length so I can get this size over here. So basically when you press Shift F, you're gonna be showed the safe frames. So as you can see, that this is the difference. When you have this is basically what you're gonna be getting as a render. Now the next thing I've changed here is the white balance. I've switched it off from the D65, which comes as native, to neutral, and that's it. I haven't changed anything else. Usually when you would be lighting up an interior, you would probably change the F number from 8 to something like 5 or 6, and then play around with the shutter speed, but for now I'm going to leave them as they are. So since we went over that, let's see what we have for settings in V-Ray. I'm gonna go over, press F10, and check out the settings. The frame buffer has been turned on. Over to the anti-aliasing, I have adaptive. Adaptive image sampler is 1 with 20, nothing fancy. The color mapping is exponential, and we have subpixel mapping. Then in the GI, I'm going to turn on Enable GI. Make sure the primary engine is set up as a radiance map, the secondary set up as a light cache. For the radiance map, I'm going to make sure that I have it set up at very low with 50 subdivs and 20 interpolation samples. We're going to go over later and explain why we are going to be leaving them like this. And then for light cache, I'm going to drop it down to I've dropped it down to 600. Nothing else has been changed. Everything else is as it comes. So let's start. First thing, I'm just gonna render out a simple render right now and see what happens. As we can see, the entire scene is dark. It's pitch black. The reason for this is, if you didn't know, whenever you're working with V-Ray and you toss in a V-Ray camera, if you don't have any kind of light coming in your scene, your entire scene is going to be black. So in order to fix this, we have to input some kind of a light. So first thing would be to check out how this scene would look if we add a simple V-Ray sun. So I'm going to go over to Create, switch over to Lights, choose V-Ray, and then choose V-Ray Light. I'm going to click over here on the top viewport and just click and drag one sun. There we go. Again, just like it was in the previous video for the exterior lighting, if you haven't watched that, go check it out. It's asking me if I would like to add a V-Ray environment map for this. For now, I'm going to press no. I just want to keep the sun. And let's see. All right, in the perspective, this is the thing when you're using V-Ray Sun. Depending on where the sun is positioned, that's the amount of light it's going to be emitting. So for example, I've placed that V-Ray Sun in this scene right now, but if I render out a render now, as you can see, it's really nothing is showing up. It's dark again. So in order for this sun to start emitting some light, I'm going to have to take the sun and lift it up on the z-axis. So let's get back to here and render now. Right away, I can see some changes. There we go. Now, we're starting to get somewhere, but still, this is fairly incorrect or very wrong. As you can see, if so much light would be coming into our entire room wouldn't be this dark. It should be a lot lighter. So what gives? What's the problem? Well, the problem with this is that we have GI turned on. As we made sure previously, we have the primary and secondary bounces set up. But the issue is that even though this light is being bounced around the room, there is no environment light coming in the scene. So basically it's like we have a sun, but everything else in the environment is pitch black. So in order to fix this issue, we can go ahead and when we are creating the sun, we can choose the option to create a V-Ray sun environment, or we can go ahead and manually add it. Now, I could have gone the automatic way, but just wanted to show you guys how you can do it manually if you need to. So you go over to rendering, and in the environment slot, or by pressing the 8 key, you open up the environment and effects. Now here it says in the environment map, you are using none as a map. So click on none. And from here, just go ahead and choose a V-Ray sky. Click OK. Now, if I open up my material editor, so I'm going to press M, I'm going to drag this V-Ray sky on an empty slot and make sure it's an instance. There we go. Now, with this, I'm going to close up the environment. And this thing here, now it's allowing me to choose what kind of parameters the environment is going to have. In order to be able to change any of these, I have to turn on the specify sun node. Now, for example, if I render now, this is what we're going to get. As you can see, now we're starting to get some bluish color coming into our scene, and it's starting to get a bit more realistic, but still it's a far fetch from the original light that's coming from the sun. Now, in order to have the same hue or the same color hue as the sun, we have to link our environment to our V-Ray sun. The way to do it is over here where it says sunlight and none. You click on the none, and then you just have to specify which light would you like to link with this environment. So now, because I want to link this V-Ray sun, I'm going to click on it. Right away, this has been linked. Now, let's get back to our scene and re-render again and see the difference. And there we go. Now, the light is starting to be more realistic, at least color-wise. But we are still left with our initial problem or initial issue. There is not enough light protruding in the room from the sun. Now, since we did this with using the V-Ray sky parameters in a material editor slot, and we have the sun over here, I'm just going to remove this on the side so you can see both of the parameters. I'm going to go down, go into There we go. We have the modify tab for the sun, and we have the settings for our environment. So basically, now we can control both the light that's coming from the environment and the light that's coming from the sun, or the intensity of the sun. Let's see how that looks like. Over here, where it says Sun Intensity Multiplier, and it's set up as 1. This is the environment slot. If I take this and put it down as 5, now re-render. Oh, okay, here's the problem. It usually likes to happen, and okay, there we go. No longer we have a problem. Re-render. There we go. Now we can see our entire scene is getting lit up quite nicely. I can even get this to be even higher. There we go. Now the entire scene is getting lit up rather nicely. But now in this case, maybe I want to make sure that the sun light, this part over here, would be a bit stronger. Or the way to do this would be to go over now in the modify tab for the sun and choose from here, go intensity multiplier, and change this multiplier to something like 5. And now this area should be a lot more lighter. There we go. There we go. Now this is starting to look like a room that's getting some nice or decent daylight lighting. But it doesn't stop here. Let's see what else we can change to make this even better. For example, when you put in a V-Ray sunlight in the scene, by default, its shadow subdivisions come down to something like 3. This is a very low setting. I can try something like 12, which is again not too high, but this should help a bit with this issue with getting some noise in the shadows. The other thing is, for example, if I want my light that's coming in the room to be more diffused, for example, if I don't want it to be this sharp, I have a way of changing this as well. The way to change it is by changing the size of the sun. What this means is you need to go over here and it says size multiplier. Let me show you how that thing looks like. As it is right now, you can see the corona of the sun. But if I change this to something like, let's say 10, now the sun is a lot bigger. What this means is that the light source is bigger, so the shadows are not going to be so crisp. For example, let's see how this would look like if I render it now. There we go. And there it is. As we can see, the light is no longer sharp, but it's rather diffused at the edges. Now the reason why we have the noise is because the shadow subdivisions is not too high, so we end up with noisy shadows, but we can fix that. So the next thing that I just want to add before we go over to explaining a few of the other issues that would arise with something like this is that if you want a lighter scene, you don't always have to go and change the sun multiplier or the environment multiplier. For example, you can go over in the camera settings, so select my camera, and over here I can just either lower, for example, lower the F number to, like I previously said, 6. You would get a lighter scene now. But if I want to get a much more control over how light, for example, this scene would be. I can just simply, let's say, choose one portion of the image, like here. This part, I don't need so much, something like this. And now the shutter speed, if I bring it down to, let's say, something like 100, this should allow more light to go into the camera and in turn give me a lighter scene. There we go. As we can see, the scene is getting a lot lighter now. Put on a full render and we end up with a room that's getting a lot of light coming in and giving it a nice looking daylight lighting. All right, that's for setting the lighting system. Now let's deal with some of the issues. For example, the splotching. This is the most common issue you would get when you're lighting a scene. For example, here it's not very noticeable, but still, if you come over here, you're gonna notice that some of these parts over here have some issues. Also here, the edges, we have some light coming through, and we have some barely visible splotching on the walls, etc. So the way to fix this is basically, I've seen some people try to go over and increase the settings for, let me just find it, for the global DMC. And what they would do is they would go over to the noise threshold and bring it down to something ridiculously low, like 0.002, and then they end up with a very long render time, and the issue is, in most of the cases, it's not fixed. So if you want to fix the splotching, that's basically a GI issue. So you're gonna have to go over in the irradiance map portion. Now, let's try and select just this part over here. The splotching is mostly because we don't have enough subdivisions or interpolation samples. For this case, I'm gonna increase it from 50 up to something like 100 for the subdivs, and the interpolation would be something like 40. If you went over the videos I've made for V-Ray, they were explaining what this does. This is basically blurring the subdivs, or the subdivision that it's coming into the scene. This is helping it blur it. So I'm going to try and go over with render, and now, as we can see, we no longer have any splotching over here. Let's go over and try that thing here. All right, we can see some light still coming through here. We're gonna deal with that as well. Let's make sure that the splotching issue is fixed up. Okay, I'm gonna let one more render go over the entire scene so we can see if we fix the splotching issue, and the only thing that's left is some of the places like this that is having issues with how this is shown. All right, as we can see, the walls are looking rather nice, except here. Now, the edges of the room are showing up a rather darker color. That is not an error. That's basically your ambient occlusion. V-Ray has the ability to directly control ambient occlusion, and in order to get to it, or get to the settings, you have to go over in the global illumination set, tick on the default, and turn on the expert mode. Click on ambient occlusion. Now, when you click on this, it's going to allow you to change the amount of ambient occlusion, then the radius in which this is going to happen, and the subdivs. For example, now if I select just this part and let a render go on, I'm going to notice that this dark line is going to get a lot darker, a lot more pronounced. There we go. As you can see right here, this is the ambient occlusion. Now I can increase this radius to something, let's say like 30. this would get a lot more ambient occlusion happening. There we go. So it all depends on what kind of ambient occlusion would you like for your scene. Also, it's just normal that the subdivs would control directly the quality of the ambient occlusion. For 32, I'm getting some noise. If I go over to 64, I should get a longer rendering time, but still get a cleaner result, as you can see it over here. Now, there's no more noise happening. All right. So the only thing that's left as a problem for me right now is this part over here. I can see some splotching happening. Now, the reason for this is again in the radiance map. This time around though, it's not the issue with the subdivs. We can see we have a lot of subdivision samples over here. The problem is with the preset that's set up for very low. For example, I can turn it off to low, which is basically just going to change the minimum rate and maximum rate. For now, it's -4 and -3. If I put it down to low, it's going to tweak it on to -3 with -2. Let's see what this is going to do. As you can see, most of these splotches have been reduced. Some of them have disappeared. So I'm going to go over to custom and manually change this from -2 to 0. Now, this is going to give me a longer rendering time, but look at the result. No more splotching. So we've fixed that issue as well. So let's see how this entire scene is going to look like once we put a final render with these settings. So let's see. Well, I kind of stopped the video in mid rendering because I thought it was going to take a bit longer, but since it's really not that complicated of a scene, it finished rather quickly. So this is what we're left with at the end. So we saw how we can light up a scene with V-Ray sun. We used the environment. Then we saw how we can directly control how the sun is going to look like that's coming into the scene, how we can control the shadows that the sun is casting, and then we went over, saw how we can fix the splotching issues, and at the end we even saw how to deal or how to control the ambient occlusion. So with this as a base, you should know the basics of how you would light up an entire interior scene. So I hope you guys liked this video and also you managed to learn something. So if you would like me to make more, then toss a like, subscribe, comment, and share it around so we can reach more people. So for now, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. And remember, like I said, if there's anything else that you would like me to make or do, make any kind of video, just leave it in the comments. So, thank you. See you next time.